Most of Singapore's opposition parties have expressed support for electoral reforms and greater transparency in the Electoral Boundary Review process in response to a query from the online citizen. The query referred to a proposal by constitutional law expert Professor Kevin Y.L. Tan, which he presented during a public webinar hosted by Academia SG on 21 March 2025, titled Fair and Foul. In his presentation, Professor Tan delivered a pointed critique of Singapore's current boundary review process. He identified a key structural flaw: the Electoral Boundaries Review Committee is appointed solely by the Prime Minister and operates under the Prime Minister's office. According to Professor Tan, this arrangement lacks statutory safeguards or independent oversight, creating an inherent conflict of interest, as the committee responsible for redrawing electoral boundaries ultimately reports to a political leader with a direct stake in the outcome. He further noted that this centralization of control, combined with the absence of public consultation and detailed justifications for boundary changes, undermines both the transparency and credibility of the process. To address these concerns, Professor Tan proposed the formation of an independent elections commission, protected under the Constitution. This body, he said, should operate with a clearly defined legal mandate and objective criteria, such as population size, geographic coherence, and equitable representation. Importantly, Professor Tan stressed that such a commission must be independent of the executive, insulated from political influence, and accountable to the public through transparent and publicly accessible processes. He pointed to examples from countries such as the United Kingdom and Australia, where boundary commissions are enshrined in law and operate independently of government control. Professor Tan's remarks came at a time of heightened public scrutiny, following the release of the latest EBRC report in early March 2025, which introduced substantial boundary changes ahead of the upcoming general election. In light of these developments, the online citizen sent queries to all political parties expected to contest the next general election, seeking their views on Professor Tan's proposal for an independent elections commission, and more broadly, their positions on the transparency and fairness of Singapore's electoral boundary review process. The People's Action Party, National Solidarity Party, and Workers' Party did not formally respond, while the Singapore United Party declined to comment. However, several parties provided detailed replies, with some echoing proposals they had previously made in Parliament or public statements. While PAP did not respond, Minister in charge of the Public Service Chan Chun Sing had addressed this issue in Parliament in February 2025. He stated that the EBRC comprises senior civil servants with the relevant professional knowledge and expertise, and that they are given the space to do their work independently and objectively, without fear or favour. Nevertheless, many parties questioned whether genuine independence is achievable under a system where the committee reports to the Prime Minister. The Workers' Party did not issue a formal response, but Secretary-General and leader of the opposition Pritam Singh expressed strong concerns in a Facebook post dated 25 March. Singh described the boundary changes as incredulous and criticised the rationale of population growth for what he called one of the most radical redistricting exercises in recent memory. He warned that opaque decisions by the EBRC risk undermining public trust in Singapore's democratic system. Similarly, although the Progress Singapore Party did not respond directly to TOC's query, the party had earlier raised the issue in Parliament. In a motion filed in August 2024, NCMP Hazel Poa proposed comprehensive reforms to the boundary review process. PSP's recommendations included publicly announcing the formation of the EBRC, publishing up-to-date voter numbers, narrowing the voter to MP ratio variance from 30% to 10%, and distinguishing between major and minor boundaries, with changes to major boundaries requiring bipartisan approval. Poa also proposed codifying the EBRC's membership in law, having it chaired by a High Court judge, and ensuring at least a 3-month interval between the release of the boundary report and the dissolution of Parliament. The Singapore Democratic Party reaffirmed its long-standing support for an independent commission. It criticised the EBRC's lack of transparency and pointed to the 1959 election as a model, where boundary changes were publicly debated by all parties, including the then minor PAP. Reform Party Secretary-General Kenneth Jeyaretnam recounted how his father's former constituency, Anson, was removed following his expulsion from Parliament, alleging decades-long political manipulation of boundaries. He called for the establishment of a truly independent commission, citing the UK's arm's-length boundary process as a benchmark. Ardew noted that the current EBRC's placement under the PMO erodes public trust. The party reiterated its previous calls, made in August 2024 and March 2025, for an independent, legally defined boundary review process. The People's Alliance for Reform accused the government of gerrymandering, citing the disappearance of Duchit SMC in 2015 and Bukit Batok SMC in 2025. The party proposed a judicial review mechanism, a 2-month public inspection period, and a 9-month minimum interval between the release of the boundary report and polling day. The People's Power Party called for the Elections Department and oversight bodies, such as the EBRC, to be placed under the elected President's office, rather than the executive, as part of a broader vision of institutional independence. The Singapore Democratic Alliance offered general support for greater transparency and fairness in the electoral process. Secretary-General Desmond Lim also stressed the need for greater opposition presence in Parliament to push for meaningful structural reforms. The Singapore People's Party, which responded after the initial publication of this article, also expressed strong support for the formation of a constitutionally protected, independent elections commission. The party cited the EBRC's placement under the PMO as a source of legitimate concerns about potential conflicts of interest, and endorsed several reforms, including fixed, transparent criteria, mandatory public consultation, and the introduction of an appeal mechanism to ensure accountability. In addition to boundary-related reforms, the SPP called for a fixed 5-year parliamentary term and set election date, greater independence for the Elections Department, and a review of the group representation constituency system to ensure that it does not compromise electoral competition. Observers note that Singaporeans, particularly younger voters, are increasingly focused on institutional accountability and electoral fairness, including how electoral boundaries are drawn. With the general election approaching, calls for reform are mounting. Whether through the creation of an independent commission or the introduction of safeguards within the current system, most parties are sending a clear signal. The process of drawing electoral boundaries must be seen as transparent, impartial, and just.